Number 6. Order. Question number 6, Phil Twyford.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is for the Minister for Building and Housing. Does he agree with the New Zealand Herald that it is no surprise his Auckland housing accord has been a flop?
Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, no, I don't agree with that editorial, but I do agree with the editorial in the Dominion Post today describing Labor as a corpse and a policy desert, and a little party lacking leadership or any new ideas.
Order. Order. Supplementary question, Phil Twyford.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. How many houses have been built in his special housing areas in the 2 years since his housing accord was signed?
Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, 8,700 homes have been consented in Auckland over the last year, and there have been 2,049 consents.
Mr Speaker.
Order. Phil Twyford, point of order.
The question, sir, was very explicit and detailed.
I agree with that. I'm hoping it will be answered. Let's wait for the end of the answer and then we'll make a decision. Does the Minister wish to add?
2,049 building and resource consents have been issued in those special housing areas. We will not have accurate data on the number of houses completed because that is only collected through the census.
Order. Supplementary question, Phil Twyford.
Does he agree with the Herald, who said that at least 25,000 new houses should be built or nearing completion by now if his 3-year target is to be met, and that the tally of 102 houses completed and known to the Council is, and I quote, pitiful?
Speaker.
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, the number of 102 is a nonsense. It counts houses in only 2 of 97 special housing areas, and even there that is correct. It is not correct. What's more, the Housing Accord always said that it counted consents over all of Auckland. That number is currently standing at 19,921 and is 1,000 ahead of at the same time the Accord projected.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Joanne Hayes.
Thank you. Why does the Minister have confidence that the building consent data can be relied upon as an accurate measure of how many houses are actually built?
Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, the reason I have confidence that the building consent data is reliable is that it almost perfectly matches the census data on the number of new houses. For instance, between 2006 and 2013, 32,600 homes were consented in Auckland, and the census showed that over the same period there were 33,000 new homes. If we compare all of the census data since 1991, the correlation between consents and new homes is better than 98%. Furthermore, Mr Speaker, it makes common sense. Who is going to spend $15,000 on getting a building consent if they do not actually intend to get on and build a house within the 12-month period that the consent is valid?
Supplementary question, Phil Twyford.
Why does he continually boast that the consenting rate on his watch is better than it was in the depths of the global financial crisis when the industry all but collapsed? And why doesn't he admit that the current consenting rate means the shortfall of houses built up under this government is getting bigger by 4,500 every year?
Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
The number of consents issued in Auckland in the 2008-9 year was 3,400. The number of consents that have been issued in the last year is 8,700. That shows you the phenomenal growth that has occurred since the disaster that the previous government left.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Phil Twyford.
How humiliating was it to have his finance minister say that the Auckland housing market is, I quote, a major risk to the economy after 7 years in government and nearly 3 years while he's been minister. And isn't that an admission that his housing policy has been a total failure?
Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, over the years that I have been minister, the rate of house build growth in Auckland is faster than at any period in Auckland's history. It is true the challenges goes on for this reason, that during the previous government we had 40,000 a year Kiwis leaving for Australia. They're not leaving, they're coming home, and that is putting more pressure on the housing market, and why we need to keep the foot on the accelerator.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, supplementary question, Joanne Hayes.
What consideration has the Minister given to the proposal of the infrastructure for new housing being funded by council debt and repaid by way of specially targeted rates on the new housing development rather than the infrastructure costs being included in the price of a section?
Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Dr Nick
Mr.
Smith.
Speaker, such an approach is just creative accounting and will make no real difference to the affordability of housing. It just transfers the cost from the homeowner's mortgage to the homeowner's rates bill. For instance, if the infrastructure cost is $30,000, that would mean that they would pay $1,500 less in their mortgage, but they'd pay $1,500 a year more in terms of the specially targeted rate. Claims that such an approach is groundbreaking and would reduce new housing costs is nothing more than fool's gold.
Question number 7, Materia Ture.